gone through all of these very specific EKG changes and kind of specific topics, but now let's kind of hit the kind of the trash can at the end of the semester. Let's talk about some miscellaneous findings that we're going to be able to pull from our 12 lead. First one we'll talk about will be potassium changes. With potassium, we're going to have either hyperkalemia, too much potassium in the bloodstream, or hypokalemia, too little potassium in the bloodstream. So be too high, be too low. We'll talk about hyperkalemia first. And with hyperkalemia on our 12 lead, we'll see these very tall, peaked T waves. Might see an intraventricular conduction delay. If we think back to our bundle branch blocks and our IVCDs, it is always, when we see an intraventricular conduction delay, it's always hyperkalemia until proven otherwise. So hyperkalemia will cause IVCD, and that'll just lead into other nasty, gnarly cardiac arrhythmias. As our serum potassium level goes up and up and up and up, we're going to see a widening of the QRS complex. We're going to be seeing these T waves get taller and more peaked. It's eventually going to turn into this kind of sine wave and degenerate into a VTAC or a VFib. All these red arrows here into that VTAC, VFib, cardiac arrest rhythm. It just indicates that depending on the person, this can happen at any serum level. It doesn't have to hit, a 9 before it goes into this sine wave. Could happen at 6. So at any point in this hyperkalemic gradient, we can always devolve into a ventricular rhythm. And so as my potassium increases, we want to catch it as early as possible. So we're looking at T waves, we're looking at our QRS complex, looking at our QT intervals. As we see these widen, as we see that T wave get taller and taller, we want to jump on it as soon as we can because we can go into that sine wave, we can go into that VTAC VFib at any point. Tall peaked T waves typically really jump out at you in the precordial leads. So remember that any T wave that's greater than 2/3 the height of the R wave is going to be a little concerning. Remember, we want asymmetric T waves, and in hyperkalemia we're going to have really tall T waves, and they're going to be symmetrical. They're going to be each half, the first half, second half is going to look the same if we were to split it down the middle. So looking at V2, V3, V4, these really huge, tall, peaked T waves, and these typically really jump out at you. The IVCD, again, this intraventricular conduction delay, it looks like a bundle branch block, but it's not a bundle branch block. So it's still a wide QRS complex just caused by something else. In this case, it's going to be hyperkalemia. So when we see IVCD, we see signs of both left bundle branch block and right bundle branch block. So for example, maybe we look at V1 and it looks like a left bundle branch block. Maybe it's a negatively reflected wide QRS complex. We're thinking left bundle branch block. When we go to confirm that in lead 1 and V6, we see slurred S waves, which leads us to believe it might be a right bundle branch block. So we're seeing signs of both, and that's our intraventricular conduction delay. And as we discussed earlier in the semester, whenever we see that, we're thinking hyperkalemia until proven otherwise, hyperkalemia first and foremost. Here's another hyperkalemic patient. We have really big, tall, symmetrical T waves all over the place. We've got this wide QRS complex, almost kind of getting into a sine wave, kind of getting there. But here we have an intraventricular conduction delay. If we look at V1, looks like a left bundle branch block. Right, if we use our turn signal method leading us in that direction, if we look at lead 1 and V6 in a left bundle branch block, I want to see monomorphic upright complexes, and here I see slurred S waves. So I can't confirm left bundle branch block, but we still have a wide QRS complex, and so this leads us to believe it's IVCD, and we're thinking hyperkalemia until proven otherwise. On the other side of things, hypokalemia, so a low potassium level in your blood. We're going to have some EKG changes there as well, but they're just not going to be the dramatic changes that we see with hyperkalemia. So the non-specific changes on the EKG that we'll find with hypokalemia is instead of that T wave getting really, really big and tall and peaked, well, in hypokalemia, it's getting smaller and smaller and kind of squished down. So we're going to see a smaller amplitude with our T waves, and that's eventually going to push up a U wave. So we might have a little tiny itsy bitsy wave. It comes after the T wave, before the P wave, That's our U wave, and that's the most common finding, kind of the hallmark sign of hypokalemia on the EKG. So there's our U wave, comes after the T wave, and if we were to continue on into the next complex, we'd see a P wave. So it comes right in between the T wave and the P wave. It's this little tiny thing, really low amplitude and deflection, but you'll see a positively deflected U wave, and that's going to give us a sign and indication that our patient might be hypokalemic. So if we look at the top, we've got kind of the gradient along hyperkalemia, and at the bottom, kind of this gradient of hypokalemia. So at the top, we've got QRS widening, we've got tall peaked T waves until it just kind of becomes more of a sine wave, and then that's going to degenerate into VTAC VFib, but that can happen at any point along that line. Could happen at that 6.5, could happen at that 9.0, or anywhere in between. On the bottom, we've got our hypokalemia. So we see that T wave being flattened just a little bit, and it's flattened to the point where it ends up kind of being pushed down into a negative deflection, and that pushes up the U wave, right? So the U wave here, we can best see it in this 2.5. We still see a little T wave, and then kind of pops up with this U wave. So you see U waves, we're going to start thinking hypokalemia. If you see an intraventricular conduction delay or very tall peaked T waves, we're going to think hyperkalemia.